if I can burr 24 properties, do one property a month for 2 years, and I can build in $40,000 of equity in each one, and at the end of the rehab, it pays me $500 of cash flow after all my expenses and set-asides, then at the end of that, I will have $1 million net worth, and I'll have $12,000 of income for the rest of my life, basically.
This is the Multifamily Journey Podcast, show 43.
You're listening to the Multifamily Journey Podcast. In this show, you'll hear industry experts share tips of success and failure from their real estate investing journeys. You'll get a transparent look behind the curtain while you learn to fulfill the lifestyle you want to live and achieve your wealth goals. Get ready for the journey to financial freedom through investing in multifamily real estate. Here's your host, Blake Dailey.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Multifamily Journey Podcast. This is your host, Blake Dailey, and we got a good show today about pivots, about changing strategies, and about all the while moving up and to the right. And I'll just preface it. I'm sorry if I sound a little nasally on this episode, going through some sinus stuff. Just had a surgery not long ago, and I'm sniffling a lot today and feeling it in my nose. But today we got a great guest. His name is Kirby Atwell. He's got the Living Off Rentals podcast and the website. You can check that out. And he has a really cool strategy. Started out was an officer in the Army. And then once he got out, started this flipping business, was making a lot of money, made millions of dollars flipping. But he found through that it was more of a business and his wealth was not growing. So from that point, he pivoted to building his rental portfolio, was doing BRRRRs and putting veterans, homeless veterans in these with a government-backed program, building up his portfolio there, making a lot of cash flow. And then he moved and then dealt with all the problems of dealing with a portfolio from a distance, got a little bit more inefficient, and he wanted the lifestyle. He didn't want to have to spend all his time managing these tenants. So he built up his lifestyle and built his business around his lifestyle and not the other way around. It's a really powerful way. And he did that by pivoting to short-term rentals. And we talked about short-term rentals on the show. As you know, I'm doing 3 commercial Airbnb projects right now. So they're all 14 to 18 unit motels that we're converting to 8 to 18. And then the ones I'm doing with my partner are 14 to 18. So there's 4 of them right now. They're commercial properties, and we're doing big rehabs in different cities all across the country, Panama City, Fort Walton, and Lake Tahoe. And that takes a lot. You know, it's building a whole system, building a whole team, building a whole company around that. Adventure Stay is our new company. So a lot goes into that. But Kirby went from 26 long-term rentals into 10 short-term rentals, and now is able to achieve that same, if not greater, level of cash flow, but with a lot less work. So with less properties, you have less maintenance, less ongoing issues. So really the show is a lot of good tips about how to build your business around your lifestyle. And he gives rehab tips, managing tips, his systems for his tips to manage, or tips for his systems that manage his short-term rentals. Got a little tongue-tied there, but really great show. And just want to say, before we get into it, if you like this, because Kirby gave some great content, like this, share it with somebody. Maybe somebody else needs to make that pivot, or they're not as focused on their lifestyle as they need to be, because a lot of people get into real estate investing to focus on the lifestyle, but then lose that at some point. So if you know somebody like that, or maybe if that's you, like this, share it, get this in people's hands, because it's really good content. And with that, let's get in the show.
All right, Kirby, welcome to the Multifamily Journey Podcast. It's awesome to have you.
It is great to be here, brother.
Oh, thanks. I was on your podcast a couple of weeks ago. We dug into the Airbnb stuff, and it's good to have you on now and hear about your story and some more of kind of that area as we'll get into. So I'm excited about it because this was news to me. But before we get into all that, why don't you tell people a little bit about your background before real estate, and then we'll work into, how you got into it.
Yeah, absolutely. If people want to hear Blake's story, it's, you can check that out. Just aired yesterday, actually, on the Living Off Rentals podcast. So awesome episode.
Yeah, that guy you interviewed, he did a pretty good job, you know it?
I know. It made the show. Yeah. That episode alone. Yeah. It was episode number 75, too. So
big milestone. I think this is like, I'm still in the 40s. I got to catch up. Maybe I'll start doing 2 a week. To get you. I can hardly do this a week.
All right, getting back to your question though.
Yeah, get back on track.
So I grew up in the south suburbs of Chicago, and I like to
You're
say,
a Bears fan, right?
That's right.
I thought we asked that last time. Yes, love it. We got the Ohio State quarterback now, so I'm hoping he gives us some experience.
They're threatening to be the Arlington Heights Bears, though, if the city of Chicago doesn't treat them nice. So we'll see how that all plays out.
Leave Soldier Field.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, growing up, I had sort of a mini rich dad, poor dad experience where I got to see kind of the polarized difference between my dad, who, I had excellent parents, and my dad had the secure job. He worked for, he was a director of a park district. So he worked for a city running all the sports and parks programs. And my mom was an independent insurance broker. So she basically ate what she killed. She ran her own company selling or, writing insurance for small businesses. And she grew that over time, and it gave her a lot of flexibility. And so I was always kind of drawn toward that type of business where it was like.
So was your upbringing like a rich mom, poor dad scenario? Is that what it was?
I don't think my dad would like that too much because he was actually probably the breadwinner most of the time.
It seemed like the entrepreneurial side of it, seeing like what you put in is what you get out.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. But there's pros and cons to each, obviously, and everyone's geared or wired differently. But I was just always attracted to that model of the harder you work, the more money you're going to make. And so I knew I was going to be an entrepreneur, but I wanted to serve in the military. So my dad said, you should check out West Point if you're going to serve in the military anyway. It's better to be an officer. They don't do much. They just tell people what to do. So, and so I applied for West Point. I went on a visit there and went to the admissions office. He pulls up my file and he's like, no, you are not in. He's like, maybe try again next year, but there's no way you're getting in here with your grades. And so then I went from there to the football coach's office and he's like, yep, you're in. And I was like, wait a second.
Us football players get the loophole going into.
That's right. Yeah. Athletes in general. I mean, so he's like, the catch is you got to go to prep school in New Jersey for a year and play football there. And then you could come up here. And so I did that. And then I got cut as soon as I showed up to West Point.
But hey,
never actually. Exactly. Everyone's basically on a scholarship there. So all you need to do is get through the door and, they cut the team down in terms of size by quite a bit. And so I was one of the ones that got cut. So anyways, fast forward, graduated in 2005 from West Point and got stationed in El Paso. And I picked up Rich Dad, Poor Dad and read the book. And I was just totally resonant. I was like, I'm going to do this the rest of my life. It was like a decision was made. And this was that's 15 years ago now. And I've been just as passionate about investing in real estate ever since. So I started buying a few rental properties while I was in the Army, and then got out and I jumped straight into flipping properties. And, I didn't qualify for the conventional financing anymore. So I just assumed that flipping was the thing that I needed to do. And I partnered with two friends from high school. And we started flipping properties all around the Chicago area. And we flipped about 70 properties from 2011 to 2016. And at that time, I basically hit pause and evaluated where we were. And I realized I had no financial gain from when we started to where we were in 2016. We had made millions, literally, but every month our expenses just got higher and higher. Our marketing went from no budget to $20,000 a month. And we had a staff of 13 people and we had, all these properties in process. And so we're managing so much more. And so there's more delays and so our cost of capital was higher. We were doing higher end homes. So it all just accumulated. The expenses just kept up with all the revenue. And the bottom line number was always the same, no matter what we did. So we started with one property and we're like, all right, we got to do multiple properties. And we're like, we got to do high end properties and all these strategies. And it never accumulated to building wealth, which is why I got into real estate. And so that's in 2016. That's when I said, this is crazy. I'm not going to do this treadmill for the rest of my life. I got to get into rentals, which is why I started getting into real estate in the first place. It was financial freedom. I wanted the cash flow. I never really wanted to flip. It just seemed like that was the thing to do. That was what everyone was talking about. So I totally switched. My partners bought me out of that company, and I started Greenbet Homes, which is my current company. And I initially started by buying the BRRRR strategy. I was buying properties that were really beat up. I was rehabbing them, renting them out, refinancing them, and then I'd rent them to homeless veterans through this VASH voucher program. So the VA will give veterans a voucher that pays for their house, similar to a Section 8 voucher. And I loved this program. I found out about it, and I was like, this is all, I gotta figure this out. So I just dove into it deep. I figured out who ran the program, went and talked to them, and built my business around it. And for about 3 years, that's what I did. I just bought, rehabbed, and rented properties to homeless vets. And the cash flow was really good, because in order to incentivize landlords to rent to homeless veterans, they pay above market average or above market rent rates. And so, I could find some properties that were pretty affordable, build in equity, and then get some cash flow. And, it's much more management intensive, but I was able to, I think, avoid some of the pitfalls because I was a veteran myself. I kind of built rapport, and it was very hands-on. I mean, I knew all my tenants. I'd check in on them on a quarterly basis. They had a caseworker at the VA that was helping them work out of homelessness. And so it was a great model for a while, but then my wife and I moved to Northwest Indiana, where the rent rates are about a third of what they were in the Chicago area. And there's just not nearly as many homeless veterans. So I had to switch the model, and that's when I switched into short-term rentals about 3 years ago, or 2 to 3 years ago now. So man, that's what I've been doing ever since.
What a cool story. Lot to break down.
Yeah.
It started with the rich dad, poor dad, got into flipping, which, sounds good at the beginning, but like you were saying, if the whole goal is to build financial freedom and build your wealth over time, flipping is just building a business, and you're earning a lot of income, being taxed really high, and then you have all these high expenses going. So it's really kind of chasing the hamster wheel unless you know how to really, take what you're making from that and divert it to passive income, use your active income to make more passive income. And ultimately, you got to get out of that business to get into the more passive game. But through that, you built up your rehab experience and got into the BRRRR strategy, which is probably my favorite strategy in real estate, because you get the velocity of money and you get the efficiency of using the same capital. I'm sure you probably use the same chunk to do multiple of those. So that's cool. I guess doing those early properties and building up your rehab experience, what was it about that VASH program and doing the BRRRR strategy that made that a good fit to hold those long term and to put those tenants in them?
Yeah, good question. So when I first found out about the VASH program, I basically researched. So the way it works is the housing authority partners with the VA, and they assign a rent rate for each zip code. So at least that's the way in Cook County around Chicago. So I basically researched where's the most affordable market to the highest rent rate that they offer for these vouchers. And so
price to rent ratio.
Yeah, exactly. So I targeted 3 different communities that were near each other in the south suburbs, where the rent rate was really high, but they were really affordable markets. And the intent, I was very simplistic when I started, because I was like, I am done with all the overhead trying to be, do things that are complex, like high end stuff. I just want a very basic business, like low overhead, something that I can wrap my head around real easy. It's very simple to follow. And so I spreadsheeted out, and I was like, if I can BRRRR 24 properties, do 1 property a month for 2 years, and I can build in $40,000 of equity in each one, and at the end of the rehab, it pays me $500 of cash flow after all my expenses and set-asides, then at the end of that, I will have $1 million net worth, and I'll have $12,000 of income for the rest of my life, basically. So I put my head down and basically did that. I just, started knocking out properties.
Looked at the goal, looked at where you wanted to get, and just worked backwards.
Exactly. So I was like, very simple, but, you just got to put in the work. And so started doing it. I was doing bandit sign marketing really heavily, and it worked really well. But it was, again, as I scaled and started to add more properties, it was very management intensive. And then once we moved, it was even more so because I was much further away then. So, and then outsourcing property management for voucher tenants like that, especially homeless veterans with other issues that caused them to become homeless. It was, it was very inconsistent cash flow because there was a lot of issues that could pop up. And so I just, after a while, I was like, this is not the model that I want. And the properties had appreciated quite a bit. So I was like, I could sell these and really focus on less short-term rentals and kind of switch strategies. And so that's why I decided to switch.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And one thing I wanted to break out in there is something I don't think we've talked about on the show yet: price to rent ratio. So taking the price of the home compared to what it would rent. Can you break that down for the listeners, and then why that fit your strategy to go buy and hold rentals in this area?
Yeah, I'm a super conservative investor, and it's probably hurt me in the last few years because of so much appreciation. Had I been a lot more aggressive and not cared about this ratio so much, I would have benefited from the appreciation a lot more. But basically, I was looking for the most affordable markets, and this is what I still do, even with short-term rentals, where the cash flow is where the rent rates are the highest. So, there's some sort of inconsistency in the market that's causing rent to be so much higher than the purchase price. And so that allows me to have very little capital into these properties. And, obviously get the highest amount of cash flow. But again, like, everybody's different and everybody has different risk tolerance. With the way money is now, there's a strong argument that, you could buy in more expensive markets and still be okay. But I just like, especially knowing, like, being in short-term rentals, that I could always convert my properties back to long-term rentals and they would perform really well as long-term rentals as well. Yeah. Not nearly as good.
And that's what I love about that strategy too, right? If you're buying on the fundamentals of real estate, if you really look at the fundamentals and you're buying at the right price, you can implement the short-term rental strategy and get the higher cash flow and do the burst strategy and get all those other benefits and still underwrite your property to say, okay, worst case scenario, if my local area goes through a rezoning or changes the short-term rental laws, they tax it differently, whatever, I can go back to a long-term rental and still cash flow, still be fine, and still make money and still have that financial freedom. Might impact the amount of money I make, but how much I'm involved in that property, my time might actually go down. So, it's a shift. And I look at all my short-term rentals the same way. And I don't think that's necessary in every single area, because, like, if you're buying a 5-bedroom house in, like, the mountains, you're probably not going to be able to long-term rent that and cash flow very well, if at all. But you can rent it out for $1,000 a night and kill it. So really, in, like, the areas that you buy and then I buy, I think it's important. And if people are looking to get in short-term rentals, it's the most affordable, easiest place to get is just, like, really, like, middle America. Like, I'm close to the coast, but I'm not coastal at all. I'm like 30 minutes away, and you're in Northwest Indiana, very far away from the coast. So
we call it the third coast on Lake Michigan.
Okay, Lake Michigan, the third coast. I like it. So you've got enough amenities around you, I guess, just like in here. And then we also have, economic drivers. You're close enough to Chicago. We've got military bases here. The different economic drivers that bring people to the area on top of vacationers. Those are the markets that really do the best from a price to rent, price to nightly rent ratio, whatever if you break it out by 30 days. So those are areas to really look into. I love that you kind of worked backwards and took that long-term strategy and used those fundamentals just like I did and said, hey, here's my long-term rent. Let's see what it can do short-term. And you actually get more cash flow for less property. So I like that a lot.
One thing I would just add to that too, is that it allows you to diversify too. So if you start with this strategy of, like, saying, okay, let's only buy properties that will work as long-term rentals as well, and you build up a base of those, then you can go out and buy that mountain house that has way higher cash flow on it, a little bit more risky, knowing that if everything craps out tomorrow, we have another COVID or Airbnb just went away or whatever, and you had to convert them all back to long-term. Yeah, those short or the more affordable ones will still cash flow. They'll pay for that luxury one until you can get it back on as a short-term rental or sell it or whatever. So,
and that's why I think it's another great reason to start out, maybe not like the first property or whatever, but to have like early on in your portfolio to have short-term rentals, because just like you're saying, you can produce more cash flow. And if you have that on top of the equity, if you're burning, take that and put it into new properties. So if you want to have a couple short-term rentals and take that cash flow and buy long-term rentals, I mean, what a great strategy, because you're diversifying while still building your cash flow and, you know, your passive income really evenly. So that's a really good idea. I think Avery Carl talked about that on the Bigger Pockets podcast of what she was doing. And that's like what I was doing at the same time, but she put words to what I was like thinking and doing. And I was like, oh, that's why I was doing it, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
That's good stuff. And before we transition into more of that kind of stuff, I wanted to ask, I kind of picked out something you were talking about, why you decided, you know, once you moved to Indiana and your management got a little bit more intensive. Because I was thinking, you know, you have nicely renovated properties, you bird them, you know, did all the CapEx and, you know, put tenants in them into a fresh new place. But then with the management issues, you know, your expenses were probably a little bit higher and then the income less steady. So what was it about that scenario, just from like a, you know, a gee whiz landlord perspective, about why that portfolio started underperforming and why you decided to make that pivot?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's a combination of things, but it's when I first started the model, I knew that it was going to be very management intensive. I knew that, you know,
is that just because of like the demographic of the renters, you know, maybe like vets that have PTSD or just need more things? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason that they became homeless. And the only way you qualify for a voucher is literally you cannot have an address. You're either sleeping on the street, you're sleeping on a friend's couch, you're, you know, and you're a veteran. And so there's issues there, underlying issues that, you know, that need to be addressed. So I knew that there was going to be some struggles that they're going through. But that's kind of what drew me to it too. I was like, you know, I feel like I can help here and provide some nice housing. And a lot of them moved in and said, this is the nicest place I've ever seen. You know, and because we really rehabbed them nicely. But once we moved to Indiana, it was very difficult to get over there as often as I needed to be, because I was very hands-on. And so it just, you know, it kind of fell apart, you know, in terms of once I got the professional manager in place, they just did not have the rapport. They were not tending to things. I was extremely proactive. And I think that's the key for a good property manager, or if you're going to manage it yourself, the key is just to be proactive. Do, you know, lots of walkthroughs, know your tenants, know what to expect, you know, prevent issues before they pop up. And that wasn't happening as much. And so I think as most investors kind of mature or start to get more experience, it becomes a lot more about lifestyle too than just the gross numbers. So I was like, you know, do I want to drive back over there and manage 26 different properties myself and have all the issues that keep coming up? Or do I want to sell those to somebody else who can manage the property? You know, the homeless vets can stay in them. Somebody else can manage them better as a local owner or whatever, whoever they are. And then I can just purely focus on these, which are right down the street. So that was a big decision as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point, like about the contrast between self-managing and then handing off your portfolio to a property manager. So as a self-manager, you're gonna know your tenants. You're gonna be more intimately aware of all the issues that go into managing your portfolio. And then when you hand that over to property management, you really kind of lose some control. So it's really important to pick the right property manager. You know, in some cases when you're dealing with high needy tenants or, you know, high problem tenants, it's just, there's really no good way to hold on to that long term. And especially what you just said, it's about lifestyle investing. Like that's why I got into this. That's why you got into it. That's why a lot of people get into real estate investing, because you can generate passive income and have that lifestyle to spend time with your family or go travel more and not have to, you know, show up to work every single day to make a paycheck. They come in the mailbox or get direct deposited or whatever. If you're spending all your time dealing with pain in the butt tenants, it's hard to justify that, you know, you're doing this for the lifestyle if you're not able to live the lifestyle because all the stuff you have to do. So with that, like, is that experience what led you to pivot? It sounds like there's a lot of different things, the move, the portfolio you had. But when you got into Indiana, what was the, go Hoosiers, by the way.
Yeah, that's right.
Indiana resident. What was that big push to get you into short-term rentals? And, can you break down what it is about your market that makes short-term rentals stick out for you as well?
Yeah. So I think as an investor, you really have to analyze what your ultimate goal is with getting into real estate. Like I initially didn't do this. And for 5 years, I flipped properties when I realized after 5 years of doing it, like I wanted financial freedom. This isn't getting me closer to financial freedom. So for me, once I got into rentals, I realized that I want to use rentals to get financially free as soon as possible. I want to live off rental property. I don't want to buy rentals just to stick into like my retirement and work for 30 years. Because there's a lot of people who love their job. They plan to work, but they know owning some passive, property investments is really smart from a tax perspective, an investment perspective. So they'll invest like in turnkey properties at 0.5% or 1% rule or whatever. And those are fine for them. They'll appreciate slowly over time. It's decent cash flow. It's okay. But most likely that's not going to provide enough for you to leave your job. But I wanted to leave my job. So I was looking for another investment in rental properties, some other strategy that provided the type of cash flow that I was seeing over with the VASH voucher type properties. So once I got over here, I heard about Airbnb a lot, obviously, and I knew there was a lot of potential. And so we were buying a house for us that was like all original, like 1970s, like needed to be gutted. And it was right on the beach. And, it had a separate walkout basement. And so basically I, talked to my wife and said, let's just turn this into a separate apartment and try it. And so we spent $30,000 extra, made it a separate 1-bedroom apartment. And we thought,
this is a house hack. This is the one you're living in.
I was living there. We moved then to the farm where we're at now, but it was because this worked out so well there. We wanted to scale it, but yeah, we turned it into a separate apartment, and we thought, we're adding that value into the house anyway by finishing the basement and adding that apartment. So if it doesn't work out, we're not out anything, and it just blew up. I mean, people just started renting like crazy, and it worked really well. So, and it paid basically 3/4 of our mortgage just in 3 months that we rented it in the summer, and we weren't even optimizing pricing. And so I was like,
worth a mortgage in one summer. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I was like, if this works this well in our basement, we got to scale this. So that's when I went out and started buying some houses in the area.
Yeah, I love it. And it's so eerily similar to my story too, because my wife and I did the same thing. We were living in a house and then rented out the attached space that was, used to be a garage, but it was converted. They had a kitchen, a bedroom, and a full bathroom, private access. And that thing just brought in money. Like, we still have never paid a mortgage payment on that house. It's awesome. It's always been positive cash flow, and it's great. And that was a short-term rental. And then we did the same thing. I was like, hey, we saw another house that was like 6 blocks away. It was the same setup, but it was detached. I was like, let's go buy this one and do the same thing, but rent the main house. And we did even better. I mean, that's our best producing single property. So I love it. And when you were implementing this strategy, were you continuing to buy distressed properties and fix them up and then turn them into short-term rentals, the kind of the Airbnb strategy?
Yeah, exactly. And sorry, I think it's bath time for my kids, so you're probably going to hear them screaming in the background. But I just got to deal with it. My office is right next door.
That's the screams of all the past tenants that you left in Illinois.
That's right. It's a reminder. Yeah, exactly. So I adopted the same strategy because I was like, I love rehabbing and turning something that's crappy into a beautiful house, and I love building in that equity and knowing that it's there. So
once you get on that boat, you just can't jump off.
Yeah. I mean, it's in my opinion, one of the easiest ways to make $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 that just, goes on your balance sheet, on your net worth statement. So yeah, I was targeting off market, really distressed properties, and that's how I started. And again, the first one, I was like, I don't know how to run the numbers. I know it works in our house, but I'm going to just find the cheapest property I possibly can, and analyze it as a long-term rental. And if it works really well as a long-term rental, I'll try it as a short-term. And if it doesn't work out, then I'll just convert it back. And I did that on the first one, bought it for $39,000. Put about 55 into it, and it was worth about 125 afterwards. And as a long-term rental, it would have rented for anywhere from $950 to $1,100. And taxes are like $1,000 a year. It's like super cheap here. Yeah. So, it works well as a long-term rental, but as a short-term rental, I started renting it, and it makes $5,000 in the summer, and in the winter it's about $1,500 to $2,000. So significantly better numbers on a short-term rental.
Yeah, and what I love most about that is how you had like that inkling of the idea and then leapt and make it happen, because you built out your worst case scenario, and your worst case scenario was still cash flowing a couple $100 on that property, because what it would do as a long-term rental. So you had only upside, maybe the cost of furnishing, which if you bought it on Facebook Marketplace or something, or from like TJ Maxx, you'd probably sell it for more, do some couch flipping and make some money that way, if the worst case scenario came to be. But what you find out a lot of times is that your cash flow from the short-term rentals are, anywhere from 2 to mine are about 3 to 4 up to 5 times, your long-term rental revenue. And just by taking that leap, I mean, it's blossomed into now. I mean, how many of these do you have now?
Yeah, now we have 10 listings total. And my goal, and that was another thing, is that like what really attracted me is like, if I can make $1,000 per property now, I need.
It takes less properties to manage, right? Because
exactly.
you have more
8, 9, 10.
That's that was like the big light bulbs for me too. I'm glad you brought that up, because I was like, when I saw what the one property was bringing in, we had our house and then the other property with the detached unit, and just from the cash flow from those, I was like, wow, I don't need 3 or 4 single family homes. I need one of these, and then I need 7 more of these to be, or at that point it was like 3 more of these to be financially free, 15 or 20 more single family homes. So it it takes the amount that you need to go purchase, the amount of money you need to go raise, the amount of projects you need to go do, and the end, the amount of properties and they have to deal with, the maintenance and all that kind of stuff. So it really lessens your load over time. Yeah. It's powerful for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah. And it's addicting too. Like the house that we're living in now, this farmhouse, we bought a farmhouse on 45 acres. We gut rehabbed it, and my wife's a great designer. She designed the whole thing. But now, like, we listed this just to see if we could, we listed it like 400 a night during the week, and then 500 on the weekends, and higher on the holidays. And we're like, there's no way in Valparaiso, Indiana, like this is going to rent for this much. But if somebody wants to rent it, we'll leave, and
you go stay in one of your
stay
in a hotel for $95 a night.
Well, we got family in the area, so now it's been booking up, and I'm like, let's just leave it open. Let's book it as much as my wife's like blocked off lots of dates, so it's just like one weekend a month. But that one weekend they come in, pay $1,800, which is like our whole mortgage for the place. And it pays for, and we're going to be out of town anyway, visiting a brother or my brother or parents or whatever. So it just, it's like, it's crazy what you can do once you start getting into the space.
Yeah, I love it. And I wanted to talk too about, you talk about doing these gut rehabs and flipping 70 homes and all these burrs. What are some rehab tips that you've learned over the years that help you get, your max ARV, your after repair value? What really helps you maximize that rehab? Yeah,
I get asked a lot what you should put into rehabs, and one thing that I always recommend for new investors is like everything is always dictated off the comps. So you have to think about what you're trying to do, because people are like, oh, I've got this house. Should I put in new windows, or should I put in quartz countertops, or should I do the cheap countertops? And I'm like, you should do exactly what. Are you planning to sell it? And they're like, yeah, I'm going to sell it, or I'm going to rent it. So if you're going to sell it, look like the comps that you think you're going to sell it for. Do they all have brand new windows? If they do, then you better put in windows. Do they all have quartz countertops? Then put in quartz countertops. If they don't, none of them do, or the majority don't,
match the market.
You're wasting your money to put that in. And the same thing for rental, same thing for Airbnbs. Like, don't do like Airbnbs. A lot of it's like furnishings. That's where you really make your money.
A simple rehab. Do quartz countertops and just furnish it really nice. Get a professional designer to do it for like 3 or 4, maybe $5,000, and then you've got something really good there. But yeah, I love what you're saying about the the single family rehabs, flips, whatever, and you want to really match the market. If you're spending, if you're doing a rehab at the top of the market, you might get a little bit more, but it's not going to be much more than the next highest comp, if at all, right? Exactly. Because you're based off of the sales of the homes around you. So it's really important when you're looking at single families. When you're in commercial property, it's a whole different, kit and caboodle there, because it's all, your value is generated by the income that your property generates. You're buying an income stream. In single family, it's all based off comps. And I wanted to ask too, are there kind of home issues to avoid? Are there things maybe like foundations or bad roofs that you just see on a property and you back away from? Like, what should kind of newer investors maybe steer clear from if a house has these kind of issues?
Yeah, great question. That was the other thing I was going to mention too, is one thing I learned rehabbing around Chicago is that one of the biggest things I look for is the age of the property. Like, the age dictates a lot. And so when I was doing rentals, I would always target something built 1965 or newer, because that's kind of when they switched over from galvanized to copper and PVC, and you started seeing more updated mechanicals in the properties. And so what that allows you to do is do surface level rehabs, which probably, it exponentially decreases your cost of the rehab. Yeah. So it's probably a third.
Electrical and foundational stuff can all be very,
as soon as you open up the walls
to like the value of the house, really.
Yeah, exactly. You don't get anything else for it, but as soon as you open up the walls, now you got to update all the mechanicals. You got to insulate it up to today's standard. Then you have to re-drywall it. Then you have to paint it, and now you get to start on the rehab that you could have done had you just bought a house that didn't need to have the walls open. You could just do a surface level. So it's like 4 times as much. So I always like the newer house, and you're not going to have as many foundation issues and all those things that come with a much older house as well. So
I've had so many headaches off of rehabbing old houses, done a foundation that added like $20,000 to the rehab, and replacing cast iron piping, that stuff that rusts from the inside out. And I couldn't figure out why the plumbing kept backing up in the bathrooms, and that cast iron had rusted through. And newer properties, definitely you avoid a lot of issues. The plumbing's newer. Down here in Florida, like in the 50s and 60s, they use cloth wiring.
Oh yeah.
Like knob and tube fuse, or the little fuses that are like circles that you get like screw in and out. It's like a little light bulb. Man, that's fire hazards all around. Literally, they wrap their wiring with like wool cloth, and it's like that's one spark, one short fuse, and your whole house is going up. So definitely want to avoid those things.
And in the north too, one other thing that I always would advise for rental properties is just avoiding basements in general. And I know some people say, if you're selling a house, you want to have a basement, because everybody loves to have a house, the basement, because of all the storage and extra room and all that stuff. But as a owner of the house, or a owner of an investment, it adds so much cost, because they always flood. There's always problems in the basement, and it's just a lot more work. So if you can just eliminate that and be on a slab, which the majority of houses do have basements in the north. I know down there they don't have any basements, but it's just by doing that, it saved me a lot of money.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. Basements definitely have issues. I know growing up, every like basement I was in, like I had a sump pump or something like that to get the water that came out when it rained. They're like, oh, go close make sure all the windows in the basement are closed or we'll flood, or they got cracks in them. A lot of maintenance there. Yeah. And one thing I wanted to ask too is, now that you have, a mix of long-term and short-term rentals, and it sounds like you're self-managing on the short-term side, what are kind of your biggest takeaways that you've learned from managing your properties now, because you've managed so many different asset classes and done flipping and all that? What are kind of your big takeaways for managing it all?
Yeah. So again, like I did this, I switched to this strategy, and was super intentional about, I probably am giving up some cash flow in exchange for lifestyle. So I was all about just trying to maximize cash flow as much as I could, but also automating the whole process. So I'm self-managing, but that doesn't mean I'm doing a whole lot of the process. I've got a great team. So I've got a guest relations person who who does everything for me. I mean, she works for me on an hourly basis, and she responds to all the guest inquiries. She books all the bookings. She she lines up all the cleaners. If there's any issues, she's the one that, tracks them all, lets me know about them. And she's the first line of contact. So I can do stuff like this during the day or work on other stuff. And I'm not having to constantly be on Airbnb or worry that a cleaner is not going to show up or any of that stuff. So I think from a management, you can call it self-management, but it's more like in-house management. Like, so yeah. I'm not paying 20% or 30% to a manager. It's way less than that. But at the same time, I'm not doing any of the stuff that I don't want to do or need to do. So I've got somebody handling all that like a manager, but they come back to me and we check in a little bit more often than a manager probably, but they're handling the day-to-day for me.
Yeah, I love that. We're doing the same thing. I like how you kind of phrase that. It's in-house management, not self-management. So we have our managers for each location of our new commercial Airbnb properties. And then we have our Airbnb concierges. So we have several of these that are VAs that answer all the booking inquiries and all the questions. They're all like in the Philippines, but speak like perfect English, and then just let the property manager know if they need anything, or, if he's needed to go on property to do anything. He's there mostly during the day, in and out anyway. Mm-hmm. We're actually building him in an office in our Tahoe property. So he'll actually be able to work from there. And what that does, like just what you're saying, allows me to step out. And it's all about building systems for you to manage rather than do the things yourself. And the book, Who Not How, is something that really helped me with that. Like, think who can help you do this or who can do this for you. Thinking about the people it takes to do things rather than asking yourself, how can I get this done? Ask yourself, who can do this? And that just helps a ton. I wanted to ask you too, what's something you wish you would have known earlier with managing your own, or, doing all this?
There's probably a lot of people who do Airbnbs that listen to this or want to get into them. One thing was around pricing. So there's one mistake that cost me probably $1,500 that I learned early on, or I wish I would have known before it cost me that. But basically, we listed a property, and Airbnb incentivizes you or asks you basically to give the first 3 bookings 20% off. And so, I think it's smart to start getting some reviews and getting some bookings going on a new listing. But what we didn't do, what I recommend to people now, is you block off anything after the first 2 to 3 weeks, and only open up the first 2 to 3 weeks. And so that way you can get bookings right away, because if people are getting 20% off, they're going to book right away. Yeah. And so we opened up the whole calendar, offered 20% off, and this was in December. And so our pricing wasn't
July or something like
exactly.
a high
our pricing wasn't adjusted great for July already. So it was low already. Then they got a 20% discount on it, and they booked like 10 days, and it cost us like $1,500.
Man,
we would have booked that out for sure in July, because it's like our busiest month. They got a sweetheart deal. So that optimize.
That's like the little ninja tricks. Have you read this book, Optimize Your Beat?
Yeah.
That's where I got that tip from. Yeah.
Yeah. He's coming on my podcast here in the next couple of weeks here.
Awesome. Hey, you'll have to connect me with him, because I have written up in that book so many things. It's like there's like more pages that have highlights and like marks and stuff that don't. And that's what I read like on my first property, and 2 years ago now, what I read to really dive deep into it. We were doing self-management at that time, doing self-cleaning, all that stuff, and just building all these systems, and like use that book kind of as our manual. But yeah, leave the first 2 weeks open with that 20% discount, 2 to 3 weeks. And then once they book, then open up the rest. So that's, actually, it's funny you say that, because I forgot to do that on the first one, and they booked it was only 1 weekend in July, and we opened up at the end of June. So not a huge deal. Probably lost us like $200 or $300, but they had a good deal. They got one over on me. When you're building a bunch of these at once, the little details count.
Yeah, and you don't have, I don't think, as much of a seasonality issue there. But man, when the difference between getting bookings in January and July is huge here.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask before we transition to the last section of the show here, what does kind of overall your portfolio what does your portfolio look like today? And then what are you focusing on the rest of 2021 to, either maintain it or grow it?
Yeah. So when I got into this strategy about 3 years ago, in the short-term rental strategy, I had 26 long-term rentals that I had accumulated. One of them was an 11-unit apartment. When I decided this is the route I want to go, sold off all those except for one. And now I've accumulated 10 short-term rental listings, and much slower pace in terms of like the properties I'm buying and renting. But I'm making about the same cash flow as I did on the 26 after it's all said and done. Self-managing these and just the cash flow being substantially high. There's some that just perform exceptionally well. So, I am really not a hyper growth type of person. I think
lifestyle.
Exactly. I think it's all about figuring out yourself. And that has been the biggest game changer for me. Because initially I was like, everyone's telling me I got to flip, and it seems to be what successful people are doing. And I was paying attention to other people and not really looking internally and saying, what do I want? Like, what drives me? And, I would trade a private jet and being on the road for being on the farm here with my kids and driving an old pickup truck and, not having to go to work. Like, to me, that's the ultimate success, and never have to get on a plane the rest of my life. Like, I love it. So once I realized that and was stopped trying to live somebody else's life, then I could slow down my pace, really focus on high cash flowing, high performing properties that are quality properties that are easy to manage, and it affords me the lifestyle that I'm after. So I'll still add a property here and there, the opportune ones, but I'm not looking to add tons of properties to my portfolio because I don't feel like I need to and don't really want to. So
yeah,
so that's
I love the answer. Yeah, it's all about, like you said, going back to your goals, knowing what you want, knowing what you want your lifestyle to look like. And if you have the properties and the cash flow to live that lifestyle and do what you want right now, then you don't necessarily need to go buy 2 or 3 or 10 more properties. Like, just be reach being content and be content being there. So yeah, I really like that answer. And now, Kirby, it's time to transition our last section of the show. It is the
Fortune 5.
All right. These are the 5 questions asked every week. And starting off, what is the biggest thing that has contributed to your success?
Probably my wife, I would say. Just marrying, right?
I like that.
Yeah. I mean, I just look at people who married the wrong person and how many problems in every aspect of their life that brings. And when you marry the right person, how much easier it makes everything. So, very fortunate to have married the right person.
I like that. She makes everything else happen.
Yeah, good. Exactly.
And what is the biggest mistake that you've had so far that's turned into a learning lesson?
There was a lot of mistakes on rehabs that were painful. I mean, I could
imagine you've done a ton of them.
I could go through contractor stories where it was just, I mean, one of the first rehabs that I did, it was my fourth. It was my fourth rehab total back in 2012. And it was a contractor I'd used several times, but it was the biggest house. All of a sudden, we were getting into a big project. It was a 3-unit that we want to convert back to a single family home in a higher end area because that was what was going to sell the highest. And I think he underbid it a bit. Got halfway through. He ran out of money. And he was going super slow. And so finally, we had like a come to Jesus meeting. And I was like, let's get back on track. Let's renegotiate on this. Like, let's get you whatever resources you need. Like, I will help you get them. Like, and so we agreed on a new price point. We agreed on what he was going to do. Like, get the dry. Like, we're at a place where we needed to get drywall done. That was the next step. So he was like, all right, I've got a crew, a sub. I'll sub this out, bring in a crew, and get the drywall done. I need a draw to get started. And so I gave him, I think it was $20,000 more at the time. And the next day I showed up at the project and all his tools were gone. It was done. And as soon as I walked in and saw it empty, I was like, I am screwed. So we went through this whole long meeting where this guy just lied to my face over and over. I give him 20 grand and he is out the door. And so then all the subcontractors,
no shame.
Yeah. And so all the subcontractors that he was working with, like the flooring guy who had just done all the flooring, he comes to me, he's like, I need to get paid. And I'm like, already paid. I paid him for you. And I didn't understand lien waivers at the time. So it ended up costing me probably about $70,000. Luckily, this was when the hedge funds were getting hot and heavy. And so they came in and bought it above what I thought we could sell it for on the market. And it I did okay on the project, but it was I would have made probably 70,000 more if everything had gone well with the rehab. So it was a hard lesson learned.
That's one of those situations where I would have I don't know if at that time you were collecting like the contractor's license and insurance numbers, but I would have tracked that guy down and just had a 2x4 waiting on him. God, that make me so mad. I'm in the middle of dealing with all these contractors right now in the different commercial projects in different cities, 3 different commercial projects, and all the contractors. Oh man.
Yeah.
They've all got their own issues.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. Next question here. What is your favorite book you'd recommend to someone starting out?
I've obviously Rich Dad Poor Dad's one that always comes up. That's a great one to start with. But I'm in a lot more now. I think in the beginning you read a lot more tactical books on real estate investing. Now I'm into more strategic books on just business success in general. So I've read a couple of great ones recently. One of my all-time favorite books is Essentialism. And so that author, Greg McKeown, I believe is how you say it, he just wrote Effortless, which is his new book, which is awesome. I just read it twice, and I recommend it to everyone. So that's a great book. It's just all about doing, what's the term he uses for it? It's residual work versus linear work. So residual work is work you do today that will pay you forever. Linear work is going to work, punching the clock, getting paid for it, and then you got to start back over the next day. So stuff like, real estate is residual work. Stuff like this podcast, this will pay off for a long time. Stuff that you can do that will pay off in the long term. Maybe it doesn't pay you as much up front, but it's all about that type of mindset. So it's,
I really like that. I like that term. I'm gonna have to read that. It's called Effortless.
Effortless. Yep.
I like that. That's a really good term. Kirby, outside of real estate and doing burrs, what do you like to do outside of that?
We started gardening this year. So my wife and I have always
our back porch. It's like a big stand-up one.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I've seen ads for that on Facebook.
Yeah, a few vegetables in there. It actually came with the house. It was nothing in there. My wife, she's got the green thumb. So we've got kale and tomatoes and peppers and all that stuff now. Garlic.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's that. So we've talked about it for years. Finally moved out to this. So
you guys got the whole farm.
Yeah. We haven't it's not massive, but for us, for the first time, it's pretty substantial. We've been eating out of the garden for the last month, and it'll last until, September when it gets, or October when it starts to get cold again. But yeah, it's been fun. It's been a fun little new hobby for me, and it's feeding the kids, and it's healthy. So I like it a lot.
I like that. Yeah, back home in where we're from in Indiana, not far from you. It's maybe 2.5 hours. But my in-laws have a full, probably quarter acre garden, and they've got probably 5 acres of land. And back in the back section is this huge garden. It's the biggest personal garden I know. It's almost like its own little farm. And they eat with that. So in our pantry in the house, we've got just a full drawer of, canned peas and fresh salsa and everything.
Nice.
They're gardening corn. So they bring it with them every time they come. Yeah. Love it.
Yeah. We're hoping to freeze a bunch so it lasts us through the winter too. So it's great.
Just living off the land.
That's right.
Last question here, Kirby. Where can people find out more about you and connect with you?
So actually I have been wanting to for about 2 years now, since I've got into the short-term rental space, create a program to help people with short-term rentals. Cause I talk to people all the time and I'm like, what's holding you back from doing this? Why are you still in long-term rentals, or why have you been talking about getting into short-term rentals? And they're like, well, I don't know how to analyze the deal, or I wouldn't know how to find a cleaner that I could trust. And I'm like, you're giving up tens of thousands of dollars of cash flow because you don't know how to find it. Like these are solvable issues here. So I have spent an enormous amount of time designing a program that I'm about to launch in September that will walk people through, take people who are totally dependent on their full-time job from no passive income to finding and setting up their first like high cash flowing vacation rental. And that way they can use that as a model going forward and just stamp it out as many times as they want. So I've got an informational webinar coming up on that goes over my entire process for buying and setting up short-term rentals. And so it's just livingoffrentals.com/webinar. So if you go there,
we'll put that in the show notes too.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So if you go there, I mean, the webinar is going to be live on August 9th. But if you go there after that, you can see the recording and you can get more information about it there. So
awesome. It's coming up. That's exciting stuff. A whole course getting people on what we were just talking about, that high cash flow lifestyle kind of business that you can make if you get into all this. So definitely check that out. And Kirby, thanks for coming on and sharing tonight, sharing your story of, all the lessons learned from the flipping to the long-term rentals and now what you're doing now. So this is really cool stuff, ton of value. So thanks for coming on and sharing some, learning from the mistakes too, which I always love hearing kind of both sides, the goods and the bad, because that's what helps everybody kind of build up stronger as they go through their own stuff.
That's right. Yeah. Being a West Pointer, we probably have more hard mistakes learned. As an Air Force guy, you probably get it right the first time, but
we just send somebody else before. That's what we don't do. But
that's great being here. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, Kirby, you have a great one.
All right.
And we're out of here.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you like the show, if you found value in it, please go to iTunes and leave a rating and review. And if you want to check out more on your multifamily journey, go to multifamilyjourney.com where you can get free resources to start your journey and figure out your path. That's multifamilyjourney.com. But more importantly, go take action today towards your financial future. See you next time.